We begin in Afghanistan, where the Taliban is reportedly waiting for the final nod to secure full control over Kabul's airport. An official told Reuters they have a team of technical experts and highly qualified engineers ready to take over operations once the Americans leave. Evacuations are entering their final stages. The U.S. has begun pulling out its troops just days before Tuesday's deadline for foreign forces to leave Afghanistan. Other countries, including the United Kingdom, France, Germany, have wrapped up their evacuations. Still, U.S. President Joe Biden is warning of another possible terrorist attack on the airport after the Pentagon killed two high-profile ISIS-K targets in a drone strike. That was in response to Thursday's bombing at the airport that killed 170 people, including 13 American service members. The Taliban also say they are preparing a new cabinet, but the exact timing remains unclear. So for more, let's get over to Zmaryalai Abasin, who's live for us in Kabul. So first off, what do we know about this swift handover the Taliban's talking about, and what is happening at the airport?
Hello, Jonathan, and good morning. The Taliban have already claimed that their two different forces of Badri and Fateh Zwakar, the victorious force, or already entered to three different sections of military parts of the Kabul airport. But whether the U.S. denied this, Taliban have already published footage and photos of the area that their forces are inside Kabul airport, and they are just waiting for maximum 50 hours to finally hand over and take over Kabul airport responsibilities. And the Taliban senior representative and delegation chief Sher Mohammad Abbas Sanigzi had just a video message, and he was pointing to all of these issues, said that the Afghanistan National Aviation Authority would be handed over the responsibility of the Kabul airport, and U.S. will leave, and that's where they are now. The Taliban seem this upcoming September as a celebrating day, and September 1 will be the last day. Whether we got different reports from the U.S. state, but over recent reports is this, that the 50 hours is the final destination to finally evacuation process will be ended. While on the other hand, Turkish are also willing, and there are reports even Erdogan himself has claimed that they have reached an agreement with the Taliban and they will be cooperating in Kabul airport. But the Taliban side sources said that they have a kind of agreement with the Turkish that they will be handling all the technical affairs of Kabul airport, and that's why Turkish embassy is located in Kabul, and were escorted by Taliban forces, and back things are normal at a Turkish embassy, and that's how things are getting over. And finally 20 years of occupation of the United States and its allies are getting to its end.
Indeed, and so as those evacuations wind down, Zmaryalai, there's also concern about the folks that have been left behind. So what are some of the key concerns for people who cannot leave the country?
They're very much concerned. They're indeed frustrated and sparkling anger over U.S. and all the other foreign missions like France, Britain, and all those who made pledges and made some kind of email addresses and forms and online applications to finally make the path, pave the way for them to flee the country and to be evacuated. But they claim that they have tried all the possible ways. Even the SIV holders, they are very much afraid because they were directly working with the NATO or U.S. embassy in Kabul or other related sections of those two entities. And they say that the U.S. had betrayed them, and also claim that this process of evacuation was just a total failure and they are afraid of their future. But this is not the only case of Taliban fear or the ISKP now raising much more, particularly after Thursday evening attacks, that economics collapse and bad situation, instability in the society, and much more that's on the way in Kabul, Afghanistan overall. and the 34 provinces are afraid of these. But those who were pledged, got their visas and everything, are very much concerning about all these issues. At the moment that I'm talking with you, there is a place, and here at my right hand there is Embassy of Kazakhstan. So people here are gathered, and there are costers and other cars that they are putting inside themselves, and it's unclear where they go, but some of these folks were saying that they're leaving the country, and the fate is unclear. And on the other hand, it should be included that those who were already evacuated or transferred to some third countries, even Uganda, and the Uganda government already made concerns that they cannot deliver services for the people, and there is no clear fate of many of those families who have already fled the country.
Well, let's talk about the bombing on Thursday that killed scores of people at the airport. Some eyewitnesses are saying they believe several people may have been shot by troops in the confusion and chaos after the blast. How much credibility do those reports have, and what are you hearing?
Well, local media is reporting all these things, and Jonathan, all the witnesses that were in the area telling that apparently U.S. forces were shooting them from the towers, right, and different gates of Kabul airport, particularly the Abbey Gate, and they confirmed that there were shootings and unstoppable shooting over the people that were on the crowds there, and there were kids, women, and men and families out there through the canal that they had find their way to finally enter Kabul airport, but they were not succeeded, and there were shootings. One of those witnesses told local media that I've heard, and not only the one person, a lot of them, that U.S. servicemen were just directly appointing in them and desperately start shooting them.
So let's also get a quick idea of what life is like for people there in Afghanistan right now. We've seen issues with banks. We've heard concerns about the currency collapsing. Just give us an idea of just what day-to-day life is like for people there in Kabul for yourself.
Well, the lack of a system which is not clear, lack of a government and vacuum of political settlement is something that people are facing challenges because of all these issues. Now, inclusive government is a demand from the region, and particularly U.S. and its allies, according to the deal between U.S. and Taliban, or the Doha agreement. They were telling that they want inclusive government. Taliban also emphasized, but the consequences up to this moment is they are not able, because Panjshir Valley issue is still on its place, and the resistance to haven't reached any agreement yet. But at the same time, they have just reached the decision that they won't attack each other at their first meeting a couple days earlier in Charikar, capital city of Parwan province, just in neighboring of Kabul. So the banks are closed, and banks say they want assurance from the central bank about liquidity and their security from the Taliban. The central bank lack money, more than $9 billion of the central bank, or the Afghanistan bank is freezed, and international banks, the World Bank has already announced this, and they made everything precondition. So on the other hand, there is Sarai Shahzada, the biggest exchange market. They also say they've got problems about their security, because there are a lot of money with those exchange business engaged people, and they want security, liquidity, stability particularly. And now it looks like everything is dependent on a establishment or formation of a new government. Prices are getting raised and soaring. On the other hand, people lack cash, and there are limited access to the ATMs only. Just one bank, a commercial bank, Aziz Bank, has already delivering the services of ATMs, and there is a limit. People who want to go there can only withdraw $200, which 10,000 Afghani. and there are crowds in front of this, and every 1 or 2 hours the ATMs got empty, and this continues. The shops are full of raw material, though at this moment we got no report, but a shortage is on the way, particularly in those suburbs areas of the provinces, and much more on the way, while the process of Afghanistan internal products are getting lower. But when the people have no cash, then how can they buy and afford all these things? The concerns are now about economic collapse, and that's belong to the final decision to be made by the Taliban and everybody politically involved in the process, and that's why people are demanding. There is much more possibility that the people's tolerance will be end, and there will be protests possibly in the biggest cities.
All right, Zmaryalai Abasin live for us there in Kabul. Thank you. The August 31st deadline is approaching for U.S. troops to leave Afghanistan. The White House has released a statement on the evacuation mission. Toby Muse has more on that.
We're going over the evacuation. I think really the important thing that came out today, and the sign of just how hectic this evacuation plan has been, is that the U.S. Embassy there in Kabul put out a warning telling its citizens to immediately get away from the airport because they said that they had specific and credible information about a possible threat. The U.S. says on Friday, 32 U.S. military aircraft left Kabul airport with 4,000 people on board. They said other countries allied with the U.S. in Afghanistan saw another 34 aircraft leave with another 2,800 people. Now, Joe Biden did put out this statement today talking about how the evacuation's been going, also talking about that drone strike that we saw Friday night against ISIS-K, according to the US military there in Afghanistan, in response to that attack we saw at the airport on Thursday. Now, Biden said that 117,000 people have been transported out of the airport since this evacuation mission began. The Pentagon also reaffirming its commitment to complete this mission to get its people out by the end of the month. Well, most polls in the US do say that the most Americans support the US withdrawal from Afghanistan. But many polls are showing that most people are not approving of the way President Joe Biden has handled the withdrawal. A number of polls have shown around 25% say he's doing a good job in this term of evacuating the people from Afghanistan. Now, the media has really been ferocious in their attacks here in the US on Biden. They've questioned much of his handling. And this really, I think it's fair to say, is his first major crisis where he's facing criticism from really across the board. Now, interestingly, a number of soldiers who served in Afghanistan have also been vocal in their criticism of the president and the Department of Defense, the military's handling of this evacuation. They've said it's inconceivable that the military didn't have a better plan to get not only Americans, but also those Afghan allies out of the country. Now, interestingly, there was one Marine lieutenant colonel blasted Biden's actions in Afghanistan, said he was prepared to risk it all in his demand for accountability. Let's take a listen.
But the reason people are so upset on social media right now is not because the Marine on the battlefield let someone down. People are upset because their senior leaders let them down. Did any of you throw your rank on the table and say, hey, it's a bad idea to evacuate Bagram Airfield, the strategic air base, before we evacuate everyone? Did anyone do that? And when you didn't think to do that, did anyone raise their hand and say, we completely messed this up? I want to say this very strongly. I have been fighting for 17 years. I am willing to throw it all away to say to my senior leaders, I demand accountability.
And I think it's important to note that the Marines revealed Saturday that Marine had lost his command due to posting that video.
Several European leaders spoke on the phone to discuss their plans moving forward in Afghanistan. The heads of the United Kingdom, France, and Germany agreed that evacuating those under threat does remain a priority, even though the international airlift is ending. Germany says it will offer humanitarian supplies to the people of Afghanistan. France says it has the operational capacity to stay on even after U.S. troops leave. The French president confirmed discussions are underway with the Taliban on possibly retrieving Afghans that are on France's list for evacuation. Well, for more on this, we are now joined by Joseph Gregory Mahoney in Memphis, Tennessee. He's a professor of politics at East China Normal University. Professor, good to have you with us on the show. So, Biden says another terrorist attack on Kabul's airport is highly likely. Just give us an idea of how difficult it is to secure that airfield.
You know, it's very fraught, and it will continue to be so. I would actually not be surprised if the U.S. Pulls out ahead of its deadline, perhaps a half day or even a day early, probably at night. You don't want to be too predictable. You don't want people knowing when the last flights out will be departing. That said, we shouldn't be surprised to see another attack. If another bombing, I don't think we'll see the same number of casualties of American troops. They'll be better spaced at least. I think the real concern here is protecting the civilians who are still trying to leave, and possibly there have been some reports that we might see surface-to-air attacks on departing planes.
Well, moving forward here, do you think that there's any possibility then the United States could cooperate with Taliban in any areas, specifically when it comes to fighting terrorism and maybe staving off those attacks you mentioned?
You know, in short, U.S. politicians are claiming that they're not cooperating, but the U.S. military concedes that it is at least coordinating. My guess is that there's some light cooperation on countering ISIS-K, but not many fingerprints. Whether or not the U.S. is able to move past this defeat and deal positively with the Taliban and vice versa remains to be seen. But I don't expect any dramatic changes here. Rather, I think we'll see some specific challenges made to the Taliban by the U.S. And then some accountability for follow-through, like giving list of protected people and info to purge ISIS-K. This won't look like cooperation, and it isn't, but it might achieve some similar outcomes.
Let's talk about why the security situation in Afghanistan has deteriorated so much. I mean, even the mention of this group, ISIS-K, that's a relatively new term for a lot of people. They're hearing that for the first time. Where did this group come from and why?
Well, you know, I think that what you have is some reports that members of ISIS-K include some younger people, but also some foreign fighters from other countries. But I think we have to be very careful. This word terror gets used quite gratuitously. And, you know, anytime you engage in a strategic retreat, particularly one like this that is happening under rushed circumstances and involving tens of thousands of civilians, you're in a very vulnerable position. Many will come out of hiding to take shots at you as you're leaving. This, plus confronting the new realities of one government failing and another one rising. I don't think that what we're seeing precisely is more terror in the sense that we normally consider, though it is certainly terrifying for some. And the name ISIS is, of course, a brand name for terror. Rather, what I think we're seeing is the messy end of a long occupation, insurgency, and civil war, and perhaps you know, continuing conflict as the rest of this is sorted out.
So how confident are you then in the Taliban's ability to confront this group like ISIS-K and, frankly, just to rule the country and maintain order? We just heard from a reporter about issues with people not being able to get money to buy food, to buy supplies. So how confident are you in the Taliban's abilities?
Well, the Taliban has said that they're going to turn against the ISIS-K more forcefully once the U.S. leaves. And I think this is, if we take them at face value, this is a political calculation. You know, I don't think they can really afford politically among their own ranks to be seen attacking ISIS-K when ISIS-K is attacking their former enemy in the United States. And so once the U.S. leaves, then maybe politically the Taliban will have a clear, firmer hand or easier hand. But I think we shouldn't have high expectations in the near term. First, not even the U.S. was able to maintain order and security nationally despite having superior resources and capabilities. And now with the vacuum created by the American departure, with the freezing of aid and other forms of support, which accounted by some estimates for approximately 40% of the Afghan budget, with the economic collapse, with new insurgencies rising to fight the Taliban, and likely some fragmentation within the Taliban now that the overarching objective of pushing the foreign powers out has been accomplished, I think we should expect matters to be very disruptive and difficult for some time to come.
All right, Joseph Gregory Mahoney speaking to us from the U.S., a professor at East China Normal University. Thank you for your time.